On the stage, we have Brendan Holding. He's from the 34th District, State Representative, Position 2. Can you please raise your hand? The second candidate we have is Daniel Bretsky, 37th District, State Representative, Position 1. First question is, will you support the statewide increase of the minimum wage to $15 an hour? Whoever has the mic closest to them.
I do support a statewide income tax. I'm not sure that.
I'm sorry, that's for an increase in the minimum wage.
I'm Daniel Bretsky. I'm from the 37th District 1. And I support an increase in minimum wage, based on a local basis and a regional basis. I'm not supporting the minimum wage increase across the state of Washington. The state comprises multiple districts, multiple microeconomies, and I think that we need to address minimum wages based upon cost of living in areas where it's working.
I also believe that we should have a minimum wage increase. I have not seen any data to support $15 being the optimal figure, though. I believe we need to do some rigorous scientific research to determine the precise hourly wage that will both increase people's salaries and not price them out with the employers that need to keep them on board.
How do you propose to fund education? Given the McCreary position, how will you ensure that those additional resources are equitably targeted and distributed to low-income schools?
I support, again, I'm Daniel Bretsky, 37th District, and I support what we talked about the levies block, where we're taking local school districts past levies, which support local education. Those levies need to be converted to a state levy, and then the money comes back to the district who passed it. I think we need to actually have other options about how to provide education. We lose 50% of the students from the time they go to school to the time they graduate. We need to be able to educate people differently as opposed to the same way in Seattle School District or all the other school districts do. And one way to do that is through different types of options for education. There are charter schools, private schools that are address individual issues, vocational schools. We need to do more than just raise taxes to pay for what's pursuing down. We need to actually change the way we measure it.
It was actually the McCleary decision that inspired me to run for office in the first place. I believe we need to enable families with choices as to where they send their children to school. There are currently 13 states that offer a tax credit for contributions to private schools, which are then used to help students go there and save the state money. And with only a few seconds left, I'll just say that's my plan.
Will you support the passage of the Family Unity Act, formerly known as the Trust Act, to stop the practice of local law enforcement detaining people without documents?
Yes.
Yes.
What do you think are the most pressing issues for immigrants, refugees, and communities of color? And what can you commit to do in terms of addressing them?
I would say the most pressing issue is access to quality education in however they seek to pursue that for their children. Also, a major issue that I'm aware of that exists out there, sometimes these communities don't feel like they are heard by local municipal government. And I believe it starts with reaching out to these communities and making sure that they have a platform to express their concerns, and then for local government to prove that these concerns have been heard and are being addressed.
So I'm really for responsible government, and I think responsible government means that it's responsible to all of the individuals in society, including immigrants or nationals, whoever makes up our society. For instance, different cultures have different issues about how to finance housing. cultures typically do not borrow money to buy a house. They need to have some other way to do it. So we need to have ways to look at addressing issues differently than the typical ways that the government has done it currently. So I'm for listen to people, try to find issues and address them.
Home ownership is often the only way people of color can develop real generational wealth. In the 90s, the Housing Trust Fund had $200 million for 2 years, which helped people of color to own homes by providing them down payments and low interest loans. In the 2000s, this got cut to $50 million. Last year was cut to $0. We support funding the Housing Trust Fund in order to provide people of color with more equitable and affordable housing.
Yes, it's important to have a trust fund. How do you go further to say that maybe we can do something that actually, instead of loans, actually give grants based upon local micro investments into bonds that support housing for people of color?
My answer is yes.
If you are elected, will you commit to meet with the coalition within 60 days to discuss our issues? Just a brief yes or no.
Yes, I'm going to say thank you for having us here today, and I will listen to not only the coalition, but any groups that we want to educate me about what issues are in the community.
Yes, and thank you also.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
The next candidates on stage are both running for 37th District of the state of Washington. And that's what includes this area that we're in right now. The first candidate is Louis Watanabe. I'm sorry. Watanabe. I'm so sorry. Watanabe. And the second candidate is Carmilla JFR. First question is, will you support a statewide increase of the minimum wage to $15 an hour?
Well, actually, I have doorbell for CTAC Prop 1, so I have a record of being supportive of minimum wage. So the other thing is that it's in and of itself, it's not enough, because what we see is the reason why we're talking about it is because we lack jobs, high-paying jobs, and that's what we really need.
Absolutely. First of all, hi everyone. It's great to see so many friends. I worked on the $15 minimum wage committee here in Seattle. Incredibly excited that we got that through. 100,000 workers across the city of Seattle that are going to be lifted up out of poverty to $15, and that's going to put $2.9 billion into the pockets of low-wage workers over the next 10 years. So yes, I support this. Last year, the bill in the state was for a $12 minimum wage. I think given the passage of 15 in CTAC and in Seattle, we should really look at what is the maximum we can get to and be able to pass it across the state. Because with the environment changing, I think we have a real opportunity to make a case that maybe it's not $12. What is the right number, right? Maybe it's 14, maybe it's 15 if we can get there. That all happens because you all continue to organize. You know I'm a community organizer. I believe the power is with the people to create that kind of change. And I intend to organize within the legislature should I be able to get there. Thank you.
I just want to follow up. Could you both clearly answer, especially Mr. Watanabe, whether you support a $15 minimum wage increase in the state?
I have believed that I am support of it, and yes.
Thank you.
How do you propose to fund education, given the clear decision? How will you ensure that those additional resources are equitably targeted and distributed to low-income schools?
So LaCleary gives us both an opportunity and a mandate, right? It says that the legislature has to fully fund education because we are 41st in the country for the funding of public education. The question to me is, it's not just about funding K-12 education. You can't do that and cut everything else. You can't cut early learning, you can't cut higher ed, and you also can't cut all the support services. So to me, it's about how we raise the revenue that we need in the state. I wrote an op-ed for The Stranger, which you can read online, that is about how we need to fundamentally change our work tax system in the country. Because 60% of all of our revenue comes from sales and excise taxes. It means that the lowest earning people actually pay the most, and that is just upside down. So not only don't we have enough money, but we also need to make sure that the people that are paying those dollars are the ones who have the most amount of money. So I say we need to reform the tax system, and if we don't use this opportunity that we have with Cleary to do that, then we're missing the boat. In terms of directing the dollars at low-income students and communities of color, we just have to make that happen. And frankly, if I get elected, I would be the only woman of color in the state senate, or possibly one of two if we can get Sherry Song in there. We need more people who are activists representing communities of color in the legislature, and I hope to be able to do that.
Each candidate answers both questions. Please go ahead.
So as an educator, I have seen many students from different school districts come to my college, Bellevue College, and quite frankly, I'm very worried about their future because what we provide today is not adequate for the 21st century. And so first of all, what we don't do well is that we don't actually value every student and give them the things that they need. For example, hands-on skills. We have said, oh, everybody should be on a computer, but we think that, auto shop and other skills training is too expensive, but that doesn't value every child. And so that's one of the first things that I think that the Cleary offers us as an opportunity to correct a lot of problems that we have in our educational system. But taxes are certainly important, and I support a comprehensive tax reform that includes basically switching from a business and occupation tax from gross income to net.
Will you support the passage of the Family Unity Act, formerly known as the Trust Act, to stop the practice of local law enforcement detaining people without documents?
Yes, yes, yes. I worked on the detainer ordinance at the state 364 days instead of 365 days. We got that passed. We worked on the first Don't Ask immigration ordinance here when I was at Free Zone working with Casa Latina and NERP and so many others. We worked on the King County detainer ordinance. So this is my history, is working on that particular issue of immigration enforcement at the state level. And with the lack of passage of comprehensive immigration reform at the federal level, which let me tell you, we are not done. CIRCC, yes, we can get it done, but we have to keep working. But it means that the state has all of the authority for immigration enforcement is starting to be seen more and more at the state level. And it's really up to us to find ways that we can pull back that curtain that used to be that there was a big division between the enforcement of federal immigration law and local cops. And when George Bush came into office, actually, he started to pull that all apart and combine those, and that is what has allowed for programs like secure communities and so many other things that allow immigrants to be detained and deported for minor misdemeanors and without due process.
Family has been central to our communities, and so of course I do support keeping families together. And I love to say that my family's experience, immigration has changed over the years. My grandparents, when they came from Japan, couldn't become citizens under the law years ago. But they still came here, and actually my father's family ran a farm along the Green River and sold vegetables at Pike Place Market. But during the war, World War II, my parents who were born here as American citizens were put behind barbed wire along with my grandparents. And I want to say that I have sympathy for immigrant communities because of what my family has gone through. So thank you very much.
Thank you. What do you think are the most pressing issues for immigrants and refugees and people of color? And what do you plan to do to address them?
Well, I think the central issue is about jobs and investment in our community. You know, basically, you know, most people who have jobs actually travel outside of this district for their jobs, which actually speaks to the lack of jobs and investment in this community. And quite frankly, what every community wants is self-reliance. And that's why I'm supporting small business, because that's businesses that are locally based, that are our businesses, and everything that I can do to make them better means that we are able to achieve what we need. And as a business professor and small business counselor, I'm really grateful for the opportunity to help people realize their dreams. And as state senator, that's exactly what I intend to do for this district. So those are the kinds of things that are very important for our community. And, you know, I think the other thing that's really important about this community is about being able to live our lives the way we want to. That's why I'm really glad that Senator Hasegawa actually had a bill that allowed for basically people of faith to be able to choose to take time off on their holiday. And that was a really great celebration that we had at the Rainier Community Center on that bill. These are the kinds of things that, as a state senator, I really believe in, and I really believe that this gives our community the ability to basically do what we wish to do and live our lives with the freedom that this country gives us.
I have spent the last 14 years fighting for the rights of immigrants and refugees and people of color and low-income families. And many of you know that I started Hate-Free Zone right after 9/11, when communities were being targeted and discriminated against because of their religion, because of the color of their skin, because of their backgrounds. And from that small seed, we were able to grow, with so many of you in the room, a stronger voice for immigrant and refugee communities and communities of color, and became the large one that was then Hate-Free Zone, became One America, became one of the larger immigrant advocacy organizations in the state, and working in partnership to build a coalition, because the issues, you asked about what the most critical issues are, really you can take any issue that we're facing, from education to transit and transportation, to criminal incarceration and the school-to-prison pipeline. And in every single issue, you see institutionalized racism, racial inequity, and communities of color losing out. So it's difficult to prioritize one issue. But across the board, we need watchdogs, proactive organizers inside and outside the legislature to say, whatever the issue is that we're dealing with, whether it's public health, whether it's education, whether it's the jails, we actually need to make sure that we are addressing racial equity within those areas. When the budget cuts happen, often those cuts fall directly on people of color. And so I have gone to Olympia over and over again over that last 14 years with APIC, with different organizations, and I've been endorsed by Danette Narasaki, by Hillary Stern, by Toshiko, by every single labor union, because we need to build a coalition to correct this inequity.
If elected, will you commit to meet with the coalition within 60 days? Yes.
Yes.
Yes, there will never be business as usual with me as state senator.
District, State of Washington, State Representatives, position number 2. They're running against one another, and it's Frank Chop and Jessica Spear. The first question is, will you support a statewide increase in the minimum wage to $15 an hour?
Absolutely. In fact, I was a member of the coalition in 1998 to actually increase the state minimum wage to the highest in the nation, and also the first in the nation since I was cost of living. I also strongly supported the $15 an hour wage increase at CTAD, also in the city of Seattle. We're working with Justin Farrell and many others, and a whole coalition of folks through a prosperity agenda to make sure that we raise the minimum wage at the state level as well. Our proposal would to $12 phased in over 3 years. We need your help on that, though. It's a very important thing to deal with economic inequality that we need to deal with. Thank you.
Absolutely. In fact, that's one of the things that we're campaigning on is a $15 an hour minimum wage statewide. We won that here in Seattle by electing the first socialist in 100 years, Shum Sawant, who went on to launch the 15-hour grassroots campaign, of which I was the organizing director. I went out into the communities to build community action groups, to get people involved in the process, to build support for the low-wage workers, and to win $15 an hour minimum wage for 100,000 workers. And it's good to hear that my opponent supports a $15 an hour minimum wage. He didn't support it 2 years ago when Shum Sawant first ran against Speaker Chop and put forward a $15 an hour minimum wage. And he did not support the $12 an hour minimum wage that was being put forward by Justin Farrell. So it's not just a matter of supporting it, but what is your experience organizing for it? Are you going to go out there and build community support for it? So I encourage people to think about that when you listen to the answers. It's not whether or not you support something or you think something is good, but are you actually going to go out there and fight for it?
Mr. Trump, since you were referred to directly by your opponent, can you just answer or respond?
Yeah, no, basically that's not true. I was actively involved in the $15 minimum wage issue through CIRCC. As a result of that, and endorsed by so many of the labor unions, we got strong grassroots support as well as the labor organizations are actually working together to move forward the working people's agenda, including the minimum wage, paid sick leave, dealing with 4 bills that we passed in the House for wage theft, because that's a huge issue affecting a lot of communities of color.
I think she actually said that 2 years ago when Kishama Sawan first proposed it, you were not supportive of the $15 an hour.
I strongly supported the effort started by Service Employees International in 775. They came up with the original proposal actually back east. So I've been working with them ever since then for the last year and a half, 2 years. They came up with a proposal $15 minimum wage, and that's what I supported when they asked me to at CIRCC, which was the first effort to do such a thing. I can give you documents if you want.
Thank you.
How do you propose to fund education, given the McCleary decision? How will you ensure that those additional resources are equitably targeted and distributed to low-income schools?
By taxing the super wealthy. We have the most progressive tax system in the entire nation, and we're constantly asked to accept more property taxes, increase in sales taxes, so that we can fund our social services, like public education, like public transit. And we never have enough money to fund those services, and we're constantly facing cuts to public transit. And now we see that education is criminally underfunded by billions of dollars. So we need to tax the super wealthy that live in the state. There are 68,000 millionaires that live in King County alone. We need to tax them so that we have a stable revenue source to fully fund our education. We also need to end corporate welfare. $6 billion every single year is handed out to corporations that don't need it. If you close those corporate loopholes, then you have the money that's necessary to fully fund education. And the last thing I'll say is we need legislators that are going to stand up to the corporations and not roll over backwards when they tell us, give us a tax break when we're leaving the state. You know, Boeing got the largest tax handout in United States history, $9 billion. They got that last fall, even though the legislature knew they had to come up with a plan to fully fund education. But they put that plan off and now are held in contempt of court because they didn't come up with that plan. Instead, they funded the CEOs of Boeing, they patted their pockets, they got what they wanted, and now 6,000 jobs have been, shipped out of the state since we got that tax handout given to Boeing. So we need people that are going to say what's necessary. That is to tax the super wealthy to fully fund education.
I'm going to ask for everyone to hold their applause until both candidates have an opportunity to answer.
I strongly support fully funding education. In fact, the House Democrats have put together a plan to do so. A year ago, we passed a $1.3 billion tax increase to fund the first phase, fully fund the first phase of McCleary. Also, the McCleary decision for basic education funding is based on efforts by House Democrats through a couple of bills that were passed in previous years, 2261 and 2776. We strongly support more revenue, including taxes on the wealthy. Our plan for $1.3 billion to get the ball rolling actually included closing $500 million of tax loopholes, $300 million in wealthy estates, and another 500 million or so on businesses basically across the state. We think it's a fair package. It was very positive, very progressive. We got the job done. At the same time, we got to deal with the state Senate, while Pascal goes. That state Senate dominated by Republicans only went along with about 300 million of that tax package. We've got to work together to build a coalition and move this forward. In addition, I'm working with an equity and education coalition that I meet with fairly regularly to make sure that the new money that we do provide for schools actually gets to the people who need it through an equitable distribution.
Will you support the passage of the Family Unity Act, formerly known as the Trust Act, to stop the practice of local law enforcement detaining people without documents?
Absolutely. In fact, I urge them to come up with a new name, and that's a very good name to describe it. We're working with a coalition of immigrant groups and advocates for communities of color to move that bill forward. Also, I've been working with Councilmember Larry Goslett, who is the prime proponent of that at the county level of King County, and he was able, through a great deal of effort, to get that passed at the county level. That helps us pass it at the state level, and I really appreciate everybody working together on that. We have a coalition to do that, and we move the bill forward.
Absolutely, and I think it's a little funny that you mentioned you urged them to change the name, because when they first came to your office and talked about the Trust Act, all you focused on was the name, and that's why they organized a protest outside your office. The immigrant rights activists that first put this forward. I don't see any reason why we need to change the name. The substance is what matters. It passed as the California Trust Act in California. Why can't it be the Washington Trust Act? So that we can build a movement of trust acts passing all across the country. The name doesn't matter. It's the substance that matters. I also think it's important, again, that it's not just whether or not you support something. Are you going to go out there and build the support in the communities for it and explain to people why this is absolutely necessary? We cannot allow our families to be split apart because the federal government and the Democratic Party establishment at the federal level refuses to stand up to the Republicans and actually pass comprehensive immigration reform. We need to use whatever tools are available to us at the state level, at the local level, to stop the immigration deportations, to stop the families from being ripped apart, to stop people being held in detention centers. We need to use whatever tools are available for us, and we can't just say we support it. We need to go out there and campaign on it. Are you willing to do that?
Mr. Chuck, I'll give you an opportunity to respond, but also if you could just also refer to this question as well. What do you think are the most pressing issues for immigrants and refugees and communities of color? And what can you do?
How do you propose to fund education given the clear decision? How will you ensure that those additional resources are adequately targeted and distributed to low-income schools?
We got 3 or 4 hours, right, to explain this. The McCleary decision is clearly going to be the fundamental filter on the next legislative session. I don't think that there are too many easy answers. I think we should all be careful about easy answers. Last year, the House Democrats didn't have a sustainable budget to step forward. It was a $1.4 billion commitment towards McCleary. That's not what we were able to negotiate with the Republicans in the Senate. It is not an easy task to get there. I think it's going to be exactly like what we did in our House budget, which is a combination of closing tax loopholes and raising some targeted tax, watching and trying to protect jobs in our community. I live in Tukwila. It is the most diverse school district in the country. It has poverty rates that are off the charts, and those are the schools where we need to make sure we're targeting our efforts to have great outcomes.
Will you support the passage of the Family Unity Act, formerly known as the Trust Act, to stop the practice of local law enforcement detaining people without documents?
Absolutely. We've seen this in the communities that I represent in South Park. ICE came in with the help of Seattle Police. They raided communities. They took out folks that were probably criminals and bad actors. At the same time, the community was worried about working with the Seattle Police, and so they quit calling the police, and the crime rate went up. And so we need to be able to trust the police. We need to trust the community, and this act will help us move along that way.
What do you think are the most pressing issues for immigrants, refugees, and people of color? And what do you plan to do to address those needs?
Last session, I had the honor and the opportunity of working on the Washington State Dream Act. I jokingly
say that we passed it disguised as a Republican bill called the Real Home Act. I first introduced that legislation in 2007. It took a long time. It took a long time for us to get that bill passed. That raised opportunity for a number of folks. And that's my problem. He's moving in right now. So we passed the DREAM Act, we passed the Seal by Literacy, we passed a number of other bills focusing on helping immigrant communities. I think that the top priorities include passing the Voting Rights Act, the Trust Act, DREAM Act 2.0 is around college-bound scholarships. I think it's about defending social services, and it's also about fully funding education that's targeted towards good student outcomes in our most high-need schools.
If elected, will you commit to leading with the coalition within 6 years?
Yes, that's an easy one.
Thank you.